Hello, I'm Brian Fox. Welcome to I Hate Rock Music. And today a special treat for me because I love this band. In fact, it's one of my favorite records of 1968 and a real sleeper. I mean, really came out of nowhere and is pretty scarce. And I once again I got it in cutouts for probably 44 cents, 50 cents. A lot of those ABC records I picked up around the same time. They were all in cutouts. Mystic Number, National Bank, and Puzzle, and records like that. So ABC had James Gang, of course, who was a big money maker for them. So they ended up signing up a bunch of other rock bands and a lot of trios. So I think they saw the success of James Gang and decided they would uh, sign up some trios. But Graffiti is just a wonderful record. Let me get through the history a little bit. They came out of the band The Hangmen, who were really a big band in Washington, D.C., and were really popular live. And they put out one album, and that was 1967. And then 1968, this new band, Graffiti, formed and got signed to ABC Records, and then moved from Washington, D.C. to New York. The band was Tony Taylor, vocals, George Strunz on guitar, John St. John on guitar, Steve Bendereth on bass and keyboards, and Richie Black on drums. And so a two guitar, bass, drums, vocals lineup with some keyboards. And so a full band, and the two guitar work on the record is really satisfying. I always like these two guitar bands in hearing some great counterpoint between the two guitars. But they put out a non LP single before the album, 1968, called He's Got the Knack. I've included that link below, and it's a pretty cool, but it's instrumental, so really unusual that they released an instrumental to introduce the band. One of the other things that's interesting about it is Bob Thiele produced it, and he did a lot of jazz albums. He's definitely known as a jazz producer, but he did this record and did it at the record plant in New York. So the band was definitely bankrolled. Um, Bob Thiele also produced the Salvation records on ABC, and those are excellent. I'll be doing a video on Salvation. But Eddie Kramer was an assistant to Bob Thiele in recording these sessions too, so it's really well recorded. And they projected a February 1969 single, but it apparently never came out. There might be promos of it out there. I'll have to snoop around. But "Girl on Fire" and "Do You Feel Sorry" was going to be the last single. So at least it shows they existed into 1969. But of course, this record went nowhere, like a lot of these second-tier bands on ABC. But what a record! It opens up with this almost prog feel with acoustic guitars, and then gets into these sunshine pop vocals, kind of like the Mamas and Papas and the Association, but they use a lot more complex harmonies, and there's a lot of great counterpoint. And so the vocals are just stunning throughout the record. The lead singing is great, and the harmonies all over the record are really stunning and really imaginative, well written, and there's all kinds of intricacies. And so this definitely isn't one of those records where you put the needle down and test out each song for less than a second to see what it sounds like, because you really have to listen to this album all the way through. Every song is so complex, and the arrangements are so interesting, and there's so much going on that you really have to spend time with this record and listen to the whole thing from beginning to end. And so that first song opens up the album, and it opens with an acoustic guitar. Then it gets into rock, but a different meter, and then they're out of nowhere. These for just less than a second, a couple big loud guitar chunks come in, and then it's back into the song, and then the arrangement is all over the place. And then there's a great fuzz guitar, lead solo fuzz guitar, and so there's a lot going on there, and there's extended passages, a lot of improvisation, odd chord sequences, odd time signatures, and some of it has a proto-prog progressive feel. Some of it has a sunshine pop feel. Some of it has a psych feel, and some of it has a hard rock feel. And as I mentioned, each little song is a universe in its own. And George Struntz, wow, what a guitar player! When you hear his first couple solos on the record, they sound comparable to a lot of fuzz guitar solos of that time, albeit um, pretty talented. But by the time you get to a third through the record, he starts whipping out some guitar solos that show he has some serious chops, especially for 1968. Wow. And so there's some great improvisation parts and jams that increase as you go through the record. And what a powerhouse band. The rhythm section's killer. Um, and then the guitar work is just stellar. So, but just the fact that the record is so kaleidoscopic, there's so many complexities. It just blows my mind that this album came out in 1968. I have no idea how they would have pulled off this stuff live, but with that level of talent, I'm sure they did pretty well. I'd love to hear that. I'd love to hear some of these maybe a little more stripped down, just to hear what they sounded like. But what a band! What like I say, up there with Auto Salvage, which I think is one of the great rock albums of that era. One of my favorites of all time. Graffiti is another one of my very favorite records of that era, and one of my favorite records of all time. There really is nothing else like it. Some ways it reminds me of that band Summerhill that I did a video about recently, because it combines some of the same ingredients, but the bands sound completely different. Of course, Graffiti doesn't use orchestra like the Summerhill record, but as far as these complex arrangements and these harmony vocals, there's a lot of comparison. And then the fact that they combine psych and jazzy elements, and then throw in some heaviness too. So what a heavy brew! Like I say, I've listened to a few records that have so much going on. There, as I mentioned before, I really love a record where they take risks, they make interesting choices, just little breaks here and there, odd time signatures, just unique ways of approaching the music. Really says a lot about a band, and is something I always look for. And so this record, on the surface, you might sample it and think it's a sunshine pop record, but when you get into it's going off in all directions and is a cornucopia of jazz and prog and blues and psych and folk. It's all in there. So anyway, I can't recommend the record enough. Please comment if you are hearing it for the first time, or you're a longtime fan of the record, or if you know anything more about the band. I know a lot of times people show up in the comments that had personal experiences, and sometimes the band members even show up on my comment section of my videos. So anyway, Graffiti. Wow, really unexpected surprise and just completely mind blowing that came out in 1968. I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching. I Hate Rock Music.